Resident Evil, a very unique, a significant video game franchise. These games not only played a significant role in defining the survival horror genre within video games, but they also played a very important role in my own personal life as a gamer. My first introduction to the series was Resident Evil 4. Although kind of late into the series, kind of midway through, it was one hell of an introduction. That's when Resident Evil 4 changed. That's when they had its first big evolution. And I love the game so much that I went back and played not only the rest of the Resident Evil franchise, but as many survival horror games as I can. I went back and played the Silent Hill franchise. My favorite game being Silent Hill 2. I love that game. And I went back and played Dead Space, and again, all the other Resident Evil games. I haven't played all of them, like at least not all the main ones. I still need to play Revelations, so I kind of need to get on that. But I played all the other ones. I played 1, 2, 3, 0, Revelations 2, 5, and 6. And a beautiful thing about Resident Evil, and kind of its more unique qualities, is that it's old and it's always changed. And seeing how it's changed is always kind of interesting throughout the years. Initially, though, the game started off pretty simple. It had an intricate level design, a little more open level design, heavy emphasis on backtracking. It had the fixed camera angles, which are kind of hit or miss with the fans nowadays. And of course, it had the unique, creative enemy, and it had a good variety of the enemies. This formula was perfected with Resident Evil Remake. Not only did that game completely change the layout of the original game, it made it completely change, but added new areas, added new puzzles, new enemies. It was fucking phenomenal, and part of the pinnacle of that era of Resident Evil games. Now, when Resident Evil 4 came out, it completely redefined the Resident Evil gameplay formula. Instead of having fixed camera angles, it had an over-the-shoulder camera view. With this, it had more of an emphasis on action and kind of more action-y set pieces, and it was a lot more linear than the previous Resident Evil games. Although all these changes occurred, Resident Evil 4 masterfully combined the elements that made the original Resident Evil games so great in its own flair. It was able to balance out action and horror very effectively, and most importantly, retained what made Resident Evil. It still had the campy storyline, it still had the campy characters, and it was challenging. It had the challenging puzzles, it had the challenging enemies, and interesting, and probably the best boss fights in the series. Unfortunately, as the series progressed with Resident Evil 5 and Resident Evil 6, it lost that. Instead of balancing out horror and action, they focused more on action set pieces more akin to Michael Bay. Although I enjoyed these games, and for what they weren't Resident Evil games. But that side of Resident Evil is done. That era of Resident Evil is done. With the newer consoles, we get a new Resident Evil era, right? So essentially, a door is closed for Resident Evil, and a new door is about to open. What's behind that door? We don't know. But there's only one way to find out, and I'm opening that door today. Resident Evil 7. This game is the latest installment within the Resident Evil franchise. Along with the game came an excellent marketing campaign, one of the best I've seen in video game history, in my opinion. Capcom did an amazing job hiding the game's secrets both in story and gameplay up until the last few days, where unfortunately the game was leaked and many of the story elements and unlockables were leaked. Besides the small blunder, the marketing campaign was really good. It hyped up the fanbase with the promise of the return to the series' horror roots. One of the most notable things that came out of this ad campaign was the beginning hour demo. This demo did an excellent job in showcasing the gameplay of the game, as well as keeping the fanbase clamoring for more. Now, since the game has finally been released, many question still. Is Resident Evil 7 the game that returns to the franchise as promised? Or is it more of the same as what we saw with Resident Evil 5 and Resident Evil 6? The answer to this is simply yes. but not in the way you may expect. Resident Evil 7 is very similar to what Resident Evil 4 did in its time. Resident Evil 7 is not a complete copy of the original game formula. RE7 does return to the series roots, but it adds so much more to the original series formula, both within gameplay and storytelling.
Hello? Hey, it's Ethan. Oh, hey. You alright? You just disappeared the other night. Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm good. It's Mia. She's not dead, she's alive.
Firstly, Resident Evil 7's story is one of the most unique Resident Evil storylines that we've seen in a while. The game begins with this beautiful landscape shot of Louisiana. The shot is accompanied with Ethan's narration on the reason he's even in Louisiana in the first place. You see, Ethan received a message from his wife, Mia, who had died mysteriously 3 years prior. As Ethan attempts to find and bring back his wife, he discovers revelations and horrors he couldn't ever imagine. Resident Evil 7's story is probably one of the most well-written games within this franchise. Not only is the story intriguing and engaging throughout the game, but it showcases a sense of emotion and humanity that's not seen in many other Resident Evil games. The game's characters, especially the Bakers, are all interesting and multi-layered characters. Besides Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 4, many of the Resident Evil's villains are typically one-dimensional mustache-twirling bad guys, Wesker being one of the worst offenders of this, although he is pretty badass in his own way. The Bakers, on the other hand, unlike Wesker, are not only terrifying, but they are also extremely entertaining and likable. Especially Jack, with his hilarious one-liners and little quips he has with Ethan. However, they are not just this throughout the game. As the game progresses, we learn more about their backstory, which really sheds some light onto the game's narrative. This character development is also translated into Ethan. He isn't a generic silent protag, but rather one that consistently reacts to its environment, and his reactions and comments are surprisingly very realistic. Resident Evil 7's story may not be as philosophical as other survival horror games, such as Silent Hill, but it is able to balance out entertainment, horror, drama so well that you will be able to replay the game over and over and learn something new about the lore, and it's just fun to do so. Resident Evil 7 is probably not only one of the most beautifully grotesque games in the series, but in gaming in general. The game's graphics are jaw-droppingly realistic and detailed. The characters' facial animations and display of emotions are so impressive and realistic, at times you feel like you're watching a really good film. The character's voice acting perfectly accompanies the game's graphics. As stated before, the game is probably one of the more brutally gory Resident Evil games. Some of the game's environments are disgusting looking, and the player encounters some crazy violent moments such as these. This type of violence and various disgusting and grimy environments you discover throughout the game really adds to the game's atmosphere, which is pretty creepy. The sound design is also amazing. The attention to detail within the plantation's various noises is great. The little noises and creaks you hear throughout the mansion, house, and even the old house, and just the environments in general, really add to this haunted house vibe to the game, almost like you're being stalked or something around the corner. While the sound effects from getting hit or other unpleasant events Ethan runs into really add to the gross factor of the game. In short, Resident Evil 7 presentation is simply amazing. Resident Evil 7's gameplay is also very unique and unlike the previous games in the series. Unlike the other games, there is no fixed camera angles and no third-person point of view. Rather, it's in a first-person point of view. Initially, this change was obviously highly divisive. Among the fanbase, many people criticize it as being an attempt to cash in on Outlast and PT's success, which couldn't be further from the truth. Some of this may be due to the fact that the beginning hour demo came out, which was somewhat deceptive in terms of the game's tone. Although the demo showcased most of the game's gameplay accurately, it had a completely different type of horror. The demo honestly had a more psychological and creepy tone that kind of fucked with you a bit. The final game did not have this. I don't know if it's just because I'm a franchise veteran, but honestly Resident Evil 7 wasn't that scary to me. But again, neither were many of the other games in the franchises. Don't let the statement scare you, however. The horror in Resident Evil 7 is pretty much the same as the horror you would find in the first 3 Resident Evil games. Basically, the horror comes from the moments where you're constantly on edge and anxious on if you have enough ammo or health to be able to get through the next door, and you're hoping that you're not going to run into a shit ton of enemies, or worse, a baker. Speaking of the bakers, Jack and Marguerite Baker act as a nemesis type of enemy that relentlessly chase you until you are dead or they lost sight of you. What makes them scary is not only are they invulnerable to most of your attacks, and they take a while to kill in most of your ammo at that to knock out, but their AI is pretty amazing. On difficulties such as normal and oh fucking god, Madhouse, that's a difficult ass difficulty. Oh yeah, pro tip: don't play Madhouse first. Play normal first, because Madhouse rearranges the items, keys, and coins. So play normal before you play Madhouse, and it's harder. But in Madhouse, they relentlessly chase you and follow you around. Unlike some of the earlier games, when being chased by Mr. X or Nemesis, you could simply run into a room and they would stop pursuing you. The Bakers will legit follow you until you are either dead, or you manage to out-hide them, or outrun them, or go into a new area. Or knock them out, of course, which is not recommended, especially Madhouse, when you use up all your ammo. Just try and knock out Marguerite or Jack. And in the specific area, they mention Jack for Jack and Old House for Marguerite. They constantly kind of pop up. So you'll be kind of like good, you know, solving puzzles, obtaining keys, mind your own business. Then you just kind of open a door and BAM! There's Jack or Marguerite right in front of you. So it's pretty stressful and it's pretty fun in that sense. Speaking of puzzles and keys, Resident Evil 7 brings back a more open-ended game that emphasizes backtracking and exploration. Like the original games, you start off in an area with many doors locked and some open. And as you progress, you slowly get keys that will unlock doors and allow you to progress. As you explore the environment, you'll find items like health, ammo, files, coins to buy in-game stuff, and other collectibles. RE7's puzzles are honestly disappointingly straightforward. They are not as easy as ones found in Resident Evil 5 or Resident Evil 6, but they are a lot easier than ones found in the original trilogy. Items such as ammo in the game are very limited and you have to conserve them, or you're pretty much fucked during boss fights or gauntlet areas with a shit ton of enemies. The combat in the game is surprisingly fluid and easy. Resident Evil 7 doesn't initially make it hard to aim in order to make it harder, like games like Evil Within, like they did that initially, but rather it focuses on super easy and fluid gameplay from the get-go. Although the gameplay is super easy and fluid, doesn't make the game easier. Every bullet counts, and the molded, which are the other enemy you fight, will, besides the Bakers, tend to move pretty fucking fast, and it's easy to miss them. And to make it worse, their head is the weak point, and it takes about like 3 shots with the special handgun in order to get it, like, to kill them in the head. So if you use a normal handgun, it takes like 5 shots, and a body shot with the normal handgun takes like 10 handgun rounds. So that's a lot of ammo. Another thing that the game brings back is the crafting system from Revelations 2. You could also expand your inventory, so it also brings back the inventory management, and you expand the inventory with blue backpacks you find around. Lastly, the game also provides an ability to block. Blocking will not negate all damage, but a good amount that will be the difference between dying or living. This mechanic becomes important later on in the game, especially during boss fights. One of Resident Evil 7's biggest drawbacks is the lack of creative enemy variety. The Bakers are probably the only really unique enemies you'll fight. The only other enemies you fight are the various type of molded. They all look well kind of molded in design, and you also fight some bugs. However, Resident Evil 7 makes up for this with its extremely fun boss fights. The boss fights are challenging, fun, and sometimes completely over the top. I mean, there's only 2 bosses that are the shoot the obvious weak point type of boss, but they are still kind of fun. Although Resident Evil 7 doesn't have any extra modes outside of the DLC and Madhouse mode, it still provides enough collectibles and unlockables to warrant multiple playthroughs, and it isn't too long. On average, people take up to like 12 hours on normal for the first playthrough to complete the game. However, it only took me about 7 hours my first playthrough on normal. So it's one of those games that's very easy to digest and kind of run through, and it makes it so much better to play over and over and over. And that's one of the things that the original Resident Evil games had, and I'm glad. Resident Evil 7 is simply an amazing game all around. It is the game that not only goes back to the franchise's roots in survival horror, but it modernizes and evolves the franchise's formula the same way Resident Evil 4 did during its time. Resident Evil 7 doesn't bring back super complex puzzles, fixed camera angles, jump scare horror, crazy enemy variety, or funky controls, but what it does bring to the table is a perfect combination of survival horror gameplay with a fun and interesting setting. Resident Evil 7 knows how to have fun, be scary, be over the top, and be serious when it needs to be. Resident Evil 7 may not be perfect, but it does provide us with a well-balanced game that has its own identity and doesn't need to rely too much on previous games' foundation while being super fun. If you're a fan of the Resident Evil franchise and other survival horror games, I highly recommend picking this game up. It's probably one, if not the best survival horror games that's come out in recent time, in fact in decades, because it's been a while since we got a really good game. I give this game a 9 out of 10. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys next time.